What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again, and this time, after 3 long years, we return with Diamante. Great to be able to talk with you again.
Hey, dude, it's so good to see you again.
Yeah,
Well, virtually.
yeah, virtually, yeah, for this 2021. But as we were talking before, 3 years since we spoke on the Bad Wolves from Ashes to New tour. It doesn't seem that long ago.
I know, it feels like more a year and a half ago, maybe, not three.
Yeah, time flies, especially in this world.
Especially this last year that I was telling you, feels like it didn't even count. Like our birthdays didn't count. We're still the age we were back in 2019.
Oh, I wish it could be that easy. I wish it could be that easy. Um, but it's so great to be able to have you here because I was actually just listening to the new album American Dream, and this is really amazing. Really, what was the thought process going into the making of this album? Was there kind of like a goal that you had in mind? How did American Dream sort of see the light of day?
I think the cool thing about this album is when I first started writing it, I didn't necessarily realize I was making an album at the time. I went through, I guess you could say, a heartbreaking experience where I felt betrayed and I was just going through a lot. And so I felt like I needed to put it into song because that's one of my ways where I'm really able to process something and heal and just move on. And so I was booking writing sessions with writers that I wrote with for Coming in Hot, my first album. And before I knew it, I had this collection of songs. And when I was out on tour in summer 2019 with 3 Days Grace and Breaking Benjamin, I was dropped by my label. So I was thinking like, okay, what now? What's plan B? What am I going to do? And I realized I had these songs. So my thought process was, well, just release it on your own and see what happens. And now here we are.
Yeah. Well, I gotta say that it definitely had, like, I would say, a different vibe than Coming in Hot. I really enjoyed Coming in Hot, but like I was noticing that there was maybe I was wondering, and I wasn't gonna ask this until you brought it up because I wasn't sure if it was too personal, but like, with titles such as Unlovable and I Love Myself for Hating You and, Serves You Right, there was like a lot of attitude demonstrated into this album. So I would say that, is it fair to say that you were writing from more of a personal place for American Dream?
Yeah, I would say that this whole album is almost like a sonic autobiography. It's very personal, and everything that you hear in these songs really did happen down to the very detail in the lyrics. And I'm telling my story, which I didn't realize I was doing at the time, but when I look back and I see the whole album in its entirety, I notice there's a story of my life of the last 2, 3 years.
Yeah, and on top of that, topping it off with the Goo Goo Dolls cover, Iris, I think that was almost kind of like the icing on the heartbreak cake in a way because, like, first off, everybody and their grandmother heard that song. That song is timeless. Metal elitists can hate me for even praising that song, but the Iris is. I've been to hundreds of weddings and I haven't been to one that didn't play that song. So I really
Oh,
think so. Uh, Great cover that I thought you really paid a lot of respect to that track. Also, bringing your own spin on it.
thank you. Yeah, it was intimidating to say the least because it's such a notorious song and it's always been my favorite. And when I go into covering a song, I always have to think about how do I, you know, respect the song, but then also not completely recreate it note for note and make it somehow my own.
Yeah, there's always like that threshold where you really need. There's always that line that you're always afraid to step over. Those two lines, and you just got to make sure you stay in the middle.
Yeah. And I feel like when you cover songs of that, I guess, level, there's always going to be people who are like, this song should never be covered. Don't ever do that. But I've always loved it. And I was always told no when I wanted to cover it. So I figured now would be the perfect time to do it.
Yeah, as long as if it's not "Wish You Were Here" by Pink Floyd, because that song's been covered enough. But I think go for anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, obviously, this writing from this personal place obviously determines the lyrics, but would you say that it also maybe determined the music in itself in a way as well?
Yeah. I would say on songs like maybe Unlovable, you see that because the theme of the song is very vulnerable, and I'm kind of exposing my worst fears and insecurities. The track is replicating that too, because it's just me and a piano and a couple of strings, but that's it. There's nothing else on there. There's no heavy guitars to hide behind. There's no drums. So it's very stripped down and naked, I would say. So yeah, I do think that the music took on the life of the lyric.
Yeah, and there was aspects on here that were much heavier as well. So
Yeah, and I think a lot of that had to do with Neil Sanderson stepping into this album and co-producing as well, because he brought that early 2000s kind of 3 Days Grace hard rock sound. And I think when you listen to songs like Obvious and Serves You Right, you can totally hear that in the guitar riffs.
yeah, touring with 3 Days Grace as well, like that's almost like the perfect bill. Like I call this has been my own like trademark sort of pigeonhole in a way, and I always mean it as a compliment. But with bands like you or 3 Days Grace, Breaking Benjamin, and I'll even put like From Ashes to New on there, I call it octane rock. It's like the perfect type of rock you would hear on Octane. So I think that this has that sort of sound behind it in a way.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I guess without knowing, when you start touring with bands in the same circuit, you kind of maybe start picking up certain traits musically without knowing.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you also worked with Howard Benson on this album as well, right?
Yes, he produced Coming in Hot, my first album, and then he produced this one as well. And what was so cool about this time is that it was way more collaborative, in the sense that I got to really talk to Howard and Neil about which songs are going to make the cut, which songs aren't going to make the cut, what needs work, um, what do we want it to sound like. And on that first album, I didn't really get to have a lot of those conversations with Howard. It was mostly the label telling Howard what they wanted to hear, and I had to kind of just be like, okay, there wasn't a whole lot of say on that one. So this time around, it was so much fun.
Yeah, and Howard has worked with so many artists that you and I both love, and that we probably he's worked with artists that we didn't even know he worked with. But like working
Oh
with
yeah.
working with Howard Benson, I mean, like I almost consider him to be a band member whenever he is collaborating with an artist. Like, has he taught you new things about your voice or just about songwriting in general that you didn't have previously?
He taught me so much. And I think a lot of that is because when I first started working with Howard, it was 5 years ago. I was 18, 19, and I didn't have a whole lot of songwriting under my belt. And I like really never recorded an album up until that point. I had done singles and EPs, but never like a full album. And working with Howard, he taught me, when it comes to songwriting, to really push yourself to that uncomfortable, painful place that you don't want to go, because that's where the magic happens. And that's where songs like Unlovable come out, because you're able to put that wall and that guard down. And then when you do that and fans or music lovers listen to that song, they're able to relate so much more closely to who you are as a person. So that was a huge thing. And then he really did push me vocally in the booth, especially this time around, recording American Dream. Anytime I didn't do something 100%, he would tell me, I didn't believe you. I didn't believe a single word that came out of your mouth. Do it again. And I love being pushed like that, because I'm always pushing myself and challenging myself to be better. So Howard, I think, has been an instrumental part of me growing as a songwriter and a vocalist.
I've heard stories, and I don't call them horror stories by any mean, but I've heard stories that when you're in the vocal booth with a producer like either Howard Benson or even like a Rick Rubin or Ross Robinson or any like it's like Full Metal Jacket there sometimes. They're like if you I heard a producer say one time, I'm not gonna say who it is, but if you don't leave the studio hating your career just from that one day, just because of how hard you were pushed, you were doing something wrong. You need to leave the studio angry and frustrated because it pushes you to do better.
Yeah. And I mean, there's also different ways. Like some producers maybe are just mean, but they're not really being constructive. And that's not my favorite way. My favorite way is when like they're pushing me, but it's because they want me to do better. And they're like, no, you got this. Just do it again. Do it again. Yeah, you can hit that note. What are you talking about? Of course you can hit that note. Go do it.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever seen that movie, Whiplash. Um,
Maybe like years ago. I don't remember.
okay, it's about that really mean music teacher who pushes students to like the brink of insanity, but there's some truth behind it. You know, the famous quote, there's no two words in the English language more harmful than good job, which I guess is the case. Um,
Yeah.
Now, kind of going back to like the meaning of this album and, you know, coming writing from a personal place, is this album mainly open to interpretation, or are you trying to maybe get the listener to see things from your point of view with this?
I think what's cool about this album is although the lyrics are very specific to my story and it's like very detailed, I think the concepts are very relatable. So if someone hears a song like Serves You Right, I guarantee you at some point in their life, they've been maybe betrayed by someone and never got through closure. Or if they hear a song like Ghost Myself, at some point they felt like, man, I wish I could be just anyone but me. And I think that's the whole reason why I make music in the first place, is so that people can come to me later and say, this song really helped me get through this moment in my life, or this song really helped me understand this about myself. That to me is the most gratifying thing about making music. So I think it's a little bit of both.
And and it's fair to say that like cuz coming in hot, like I said before, that had like a completely different vibe in a way. Like was there like so there's a lot of contrast. Like people who like you have a very distinct voice where I could tell that it's you. Like even that collaboration that you did with Bad Wolves a couple of years back, like I knew that that was you right out of the gate. But I feel like that this album is going to show sides of you that maybe people who may have gotten a good idea who you are and coming in hot, they're going to see a completely different side of who Diamante is, right?
Yeah, I would say that Coming in Hot was more an introduction to me as an artist because, nobody knew who I was. And this was kind of like, okay, this is Diamante. But this album is more an introduction to me as a human being. And I think on Coming in Hot, I always wrote from that perspective of like, I'm strong and confident and I can, get through anything and everything's great. And this time around, I wanted to write about the sides of me that I don't necessarily love, or moments I've had where I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, because that happens all the time. And I think this album is more honest in that way.
Yeah, and not to say like I thought coming in hot was great, but there was like kind of in a way like maybe a facade over it. Like you were demonstrating, you were starting things off on a great note. You were demonstrating your strength right out of the gate, hitting the ground running, and that was great. But I think that this showcases a more vulnerable side. I think it goes to show that Diamante is real and that you're not really like for lack of better terms, portraying like a character in the music or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think every artist feels this a little bit, like when we go on stage and we play a show, we kind of do become this alter ego, or like this self actualized version of ourselves where we're completely unstoppable and we can do anything we want. And I think that was the perspective I was writing more on the first album. Was like this one, I wanted people to see Diamante when she's not on stage and when she's not in full like rock star mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if it's like as raw as an acoustic performance, even like there's still like a. I feel like when you're live, and when I saw you live at the Bad Wolves tour 3 years ago, it was great. Like I really enjoyed
Thank
watching the
you.
set and everything. Great energy. But like I feel like for every artist, regardless of what style you're playing, whether it's black metal or whether it's smooth jazz, there is almost kind of like a essence of stage presence or like a persona that you have to portray in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always make the joke like, man, I wish I could be more like stage Diamante in other areas of my life.
And maybe that could be a disadvantage. That could, you know, you don't want to get lost in who you portray. That is a possibility. You know.
Yeah, and this last year, I learned that the hard way when touring and shows were all canceled. I definitely had kind of an identity crisis where I was going, who am I when if I'm not playing shows? Like, why do I matter? What's my purpose? So I had to rediscover Diamante the human being, and then I put a lot of that into the album.
Do you think that making this album is going to influence now, or you had a lot of discoveries about yourself on how you would write music in the future?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna definitely keep that mentality of just put it all out there on the table, because that is what makes the song so much more powerful. And I don't know if it's always going to be autobiographical, but it's definitely always going to be something that I believe in. I never want to write a song that didn't come from me personally.
Yeah, and not to mention, and one of my personal favorite vocalists is David Draymond of Disturbed, and he always like writes like a lot of he went through a lot of personal darkness in his life, and always uses it as a fuel for the fire. But I'd imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like if you're, it's great to use art as a release through troubling experiences, but if you rely on that, that's got to make the songwriting somewhat deteriorating, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to find the healthy balance for sure.
Yep. And when it comes to your live shows, as we were talking about before, is there maybe at all though a similar energy that you channel into your live performance as you do in your songwriting?
Yeah. And I think that happened more this time around because something I noticed when I would tour coming in hot, because prior to that, when I was making that album, I wasn't playing shows, I wasn't touring, I didn't have my live band. But when I did go to play it live, the one comment I got all the time was, I listened to your stuff and I thought it was cool, but I had no idea you were going to sound like that.
Hmm.
I had no idea it was going to be this heavy or or raw. So I could tell that there was a disconnect between what was on the studio album and what was happening in the live show. So this time around, I definitely wanted to incorporate more of that live sound and what it sounds like to go to one of my shows and put that on the album. And I think that's why you hear more heavier tones and why it sounds a little less polished than the first album.
You just reminded me of a favorite experience I had when you went on stage. But I don't know how you'll take this, but when I first saw you live, I saw three people in shock because they thought you were Elisa from Arch Enemy. And she was like, "Oh my God,
Oh
she's in."
yeah. I get that a lot. I get that a lot because of the hair.
Yeah, but like she was like, "Oh wow, she's in a rock band now." But like, so, but so just a little funny story there. But do you almost like have to practice stage presence or like practice crowd interaction in a way too for your live shows, or is that just something that comes naturally as you do more and more of it?
Um, I feel like the presence for me at least is more natural because I grew up doing musical theater. So ever since I was 9, 10 years old, I knew what I had to do to have a presence on a big stage and captivate an audience. And a lot of times in musical theater, you don't even have a mic, so you have to like really project and make yourself larger than life. But the talking to the crowd, that definitely sometimes I need like more practice with because I'll just be so in the moment. I'm like, yeah, or I'll say something stupid, or I'll just um, be awkward. But I always try to just have fun because I feel like I'm an overthinker just in everyday life. And when I start overthinking on stage, that's when it all starts going south. So I feel like the less I think about it and the more I just have fun with the crowd, the better the show is.
Yeah, do you have like dolls or pictures set up when you practice that or something like that to pretend?
No, it's even worse. It happens during a band rehearsal, and I have to pretend like I'm talking to the crowd, and there's no crowd, and it's just so awkward and weird.
I think it's awkward no matter what you do. Like I don't think
Yeah,
because you never know what the audience is going to be, and I can't speak for every artist, but I think that's one of the coolest things about a live show is that no matter how many times you tour, no matter how many times you play live, how many shows you do, there's always you're never going to know what you're going to get out of the audience that day, no matter how long you've been into the career.
absolutely. It's always a guessing game, and sometimes my favorite thing actually is when I get out on stage and 99.9% of the people there have no idea who I am, and they're just like, but then 4 songs in there, I see them starting to go like, okay, and in my head I'm like, yes, win, win.
Yeah, it's
It's
like
never know.
it's like a video game. You have to like it's like a video game, and the audience members are almost like a target. Get that one, get that one, get that one, get that one. Then you got the guy in the,
Yeah,
then you got
exactly.
then you got the guy in the middle of the pit with the "Impress Me, Bro" arm stance, and that's the final boss. So
That is the final boss. And then he like cracks a little smile. He's like, I'm like, yes, I did it. I did
yep,
it.
exactly. Exactly. And the final question I wanted to ask you is for your inspiration, whether it is for structure ideas for the song or lyrically, does inspiration sometimes strike when you least expect it as well? Because even though that you wrote this album from a personal place, like I'd imagine that inspiration sometimes strikes at the most inconvenient times, right?
Oh yeah, for me, um, it rarely ever happens during a writing session. Like once I have the concept and it starts going, then yeah, but like the inception of a song idea rarely ever starts when I'm being told I have to write. It always happens when I'm in the shower or I'm taking a bath or it's like 3 a.m. in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta voice memo this or I gotta write this phrase down or this word down. And songs for me always start with the concept, maybe a melody and a lyric. And then I always, whenever I go to write with a co writer, start on an acoustic guitar and just flesh out the song. We call it like the skeleton of the song. And then from there, build the instrumentation and make a track and put everything that I want on the song, as opposed to starting out with a fully produced track and trying to write to that.
Yeah, if you revolve around it too much of a preconceived idea, no matter what the outcome is, you'll be disappointed.
Yeah, and I feel like it limits you too. So, yeah, for me, the creativity always sparks at the weirdest moments.
Yeah, they're gonna start having to make like home studios for cars because a lot of people get inspiration for when they're driving. So like they're just gonna start having to make home studios built in your car.
Yeah, that was a big one for me too. And I'd have to pull over and I'd have to voice note the idea really quick because I'll forget it in 2 seconds.
Yep, that's why I and in New York City, which is one of the art capitals of the world, I blame that for all the traffic we get. I think that's what it is. Somebody gets an artistic idea, and that's why
Is
it's
that
there.
what's happening in LA too? Is that what it is?
Maybe I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure what's worse. I've been in New York and L.A. multiple times, and I can't tell which whose traffic is worse. So
They're both pretty bad.
yeah, we should make that a competition actually, like live stream traffic both of our rush hours. Um, so before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for another great discussion. Is there just anything else that you would like to promote for the release of American Dream? Obviously, thanks to a certain virus that shall not be named. Obviously, touring is not happening at the moment. Knocking on wood, we're getting out of this soon. But like, obviously, when touring opens up again, we'll be seeing you on the road a bit, right?
Yes. I mean, as of right now, I have one festival that I've announced that like hopefully does happen. It's Incarceration in Ohio, and if it does go through, I'm gonna be so stoked to be able to play that festival. I have a couple more lined up as well that haven't been announced yet, and then the goal is to do a full tour in 2022. I shot some really cool music videos for this album, and they're all very different from the last one, and they're all kind of like mini movies. And so I can't wait for everyone to see those too.
I can't wait to see those as well. And Incarceration, I was there in 2019, and man, was it a fun festival. Yeah, and
Yeah, I've heard that it's so much fun.
the lineup this year too. I mean, which day are you playing?
I'm playing Saturday, and that's the day that Mudvayne is playing. So I'm so excited.
I'm yeah, that's gonna be Mudvayne, Slipknot, Mudvayne, and Rob Zombie. I mean, you're not gonna get more epic of a live show than that. That's gonna be
Yeah.
insane. So, yep. But thank you so much again for your time, everybody. Diamante, American Dream, out May 7th of this year. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.